You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
You're listening to Mission Log the Orville, an episode-by-episode discussion of the adventures of the crew of the USS Orville. Welcome to another episode of Mission Log the Orville. This episode, The Word of Avis, the second of 6 comic books written by executive producer and friend of the show, David A. Goodman. This one is where there's a gang of wacky xenoanthropologists, and they decided to defect to the Word of Avis. Huh? See what they did there?
Oh!
Tamim, Ebadine, Jess. My name is Mike Richards.
No, thank you. I have some already. And I'm Jessica Lindberty. Mission Log the Orville is a conversation that depends on your participation because we'll have some fun because the Orville is fun and we'll discuss the meanings, morals, and messages. And that's what we do on Mission Log the Orville. And then we get to hear your thoughts and ideas. So you need to tell us what you think at ML_the Orville on Twitter or Mission Log Pod on Facebook. Or you can just email us, I guess, missionlog-the Orville at Roddenberry.com. If you're watching this on the Roddenberry YouTube channel, hit like, subscribe, ring that bell, and remember, we might just use your comments on an upcoming episode. So anyway, are your rates good with Avis or should I go with Hertz?
Well, Mike? I'm more of a national guy.
Oh, God.
Emerald Isle, baby. Grab the keys and go.
I love it. All right, give us the recap, Mike.
The Word of Avis, Part 1. After a brutal session in the environmental simulator, severing the heads of other guys who believe in exactly the same God, but in a slightly different way, Isaac detects a Union transport ship on a course for Krill space. With no response, Ed orders Bortus to lock on a tractor beam. However, the transport goes to full power, overheating their engines, which will only result in blowing themselves up. Fear not, Saladin, a.k.a. John Lamar, has an idea. He can link to their engineering panel and shut down their engines. With Lieutenant Dan by his side and the engine's about to overload, First Officer Kelly Exposition reminds Ed, if we cut the tractor beam, it'll be like snapping a rubber band, and the transport will fly off into Krill space. Without dignifying Kelly's physics lesson with a response, Ed asks for a status update. Lieutenant Dan is getting some weird feedback from the transport's engineering panel, but it's probably best to ignore it. Pretend nothing has happened and hope everything turns out all right in the morning. But just in the nick of time, John shuts the engines down and the transport is tractored into the bay. Gordon and Bortus agree that is one ship of anal orifices.
Oh.
Can't say the other word.
Uranus.
Urani.
Uranus.
But it turns out the ship is actually full of xenoanthropologists on their way to Mizar 2 to study primitive cultures.
Sure they are.
I wonder if they went to Emily Dickinson College also. Sadly, these academics are not very good at space shipping. They've neglected their sensors, comms, and navigation systems. Sure. Ed's going to look into it, Claire's going to look into them, John's going to look into their ship, and Alara's going to keep an eye on them. Ready? Break. On the transport, John finds Celeste, an acquaintance from Union Point. As Dan tries to be smooth, like Dan is, Yaphet reaches up with something we hope is a hand to try to get her attention. Sadly for these two, there's obvious chemistry between the other two, and the first two are done. Celeste left engineering and became a xenoanthropologist, which explains her presence on the transport. In the mess hall, Darden, the leader, along with Karks, who I think is Olix the bartender's brother, and Franz tell Gordon that they were tasked with examining the Ancana, the Krill Holy Book, and are weirdly interested in Gordon's time on the Krill ship, as they luxuriate in the creepiness of the Krill religious ceremony. All of this is starting to look like too much of a coincidence to Ed, but as of yet, they have no proof, until John and Alara, having learned nothing from Alara's illegal search of Priya's quarters, tap into the cameras on the transport and see the visitors conducting a Krill religious ceremony, to be fair, without a severed human head.
To be fair.
Confronted by the senior staff, Darden and the leader of the Xenos recount how they found truth in the Ancana and how that, with the help of Talea, they converted to the Krill religion. Questioning whether Ed believes in freedom of religion or not, and their ability to decide their own fate, Kelly points out that's not in question. It's a matter of boundaries, like literal space boundaries, and like literally not starting a war by crossing those boundaries. Speaking of boundaries, remember that weird feedback? Turns out Celeste uploaded a program into the Orville's navigation system, and that took the Orville 35 light years into Krill space. Part 2. With the probability of the Orville being detected, they decide to use the Calivan holographic tech to disguise the Orville as a Krill ship while hightailing it back to Union space. As luck would have it, a convoy of Krill ships detects that apparent Krill ship heading for Union space. The Krill captain hears the whisper of Avis telling him that's not a Krill ship, so they scan the Orville again, this time with neutron radiation. You know the stuff that jacked up Ed and Gordon's holographic suits when they were on the Krill ship studying the Ancana? Yeah, they used that, and ba-boom, the Orville is exposed. Missiles fired, the Orville hides in an asteroid just as the missiles impact the surface and trap the Orville inside. John comes up with a new plan, ignoring what a cluster the Calivan holographic generator was.
Cluster.
They'll use it to disguise the transport as the Orville and send it away at maximum speed, hoping the Krill convoy will pursue it. Only one problem. The transport systems are locked. Ed chastises Darden for sacrificing everyone on board the Orville, who simply replies, "It is the will of Avis." This clearly doesn't sit well with the others, who ultimately release the controls on the transport as Kelly stuns Darden real good, allowing John's plan to become reality. Taking the bait, the Orville heads for home. John tells Celeste that it's never too late to start over. He recently found a new dimension in his life, and he's now on a new track. It just took a little help from a friend. Epilogue. On the Krill ship, the captain laments that the Orville is back in Union space by now. As a shadowy figure states, it's just as well. Its commander is someone she has plans for. Very special plans. The end.
Plans to fall in love with, am I right?
Plans to watch movies with. Plans
Very
to listen
good.
to Billy Joel.
That's right. Oh, God. She'll always be a woman to me.
Yeah.
Good job, Mike. Thank you for the couple of great chuckles in there.
Good.
I loved it. Yeah, tell us what's what. Actually, before you tell us what's what, I can't help but notice your awesome T-shirt. What's going on there?
Oh, I got this from.
Can you-
I'll try to get you a little look at it right there.
Ooh.
It says Gordon Malloy's Huggin' the Donkey Flight School, and pick this up from I think T Public or someplace like that. So
Got it. I'm into it. I like it.
surely unlicensed, I bet. And
Well, yeah. So good for them. They got. This is a Target shirt, so I'm doing really well today.
well, good.
It's brand new, so it's not stained yet.
Yeah, I picked up a little bit of Orville merch here and there. Just if I ever remember to do my taxes, I'll write them off.
Oh no! Don't even talk to me about taxes. So tell us what's what. What are the specs on this?
So this one also written by David Goodman. Same team, David Cabeza doing the illustration and the colorist by Michael Attea. This, like last week's, like all of these, there will be 6 stories. They each consist of 2 parts. And I didn't mention that last week. Part 1 was released on September 11th, 2019. Part 2, not until October 16th. So 5 weeks later. In 2019. So put yourself in that position. You find the Orville stuck 35 light years in Krill space with a navigation system virus that was uploaded by Celeste. You got to wait 5 weeks to find out what happened next.
They're dead.
That doesn't seem fair.
No, that's not fair at all.
That doesn't seem fair. And it's set between seasons 1 and 2. This is the last of the 1.5 issue of comics. So these are set between seasons 1 and seasons 2.
Gotcha.
Last week
so
was...
because you got me this amazing book, I'm confused. I thought all of this was in between, but obviously the next set is between 2 and 3.
Yeah, when we cover launch day next week, that'll be set between seasons 2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
We are one more episode. This is right in the middle of season 1 and season 2.
Yep, set. I don't know how they know this. July of 2420, maybe in the writer's notes somehow. I pulled that off of the Orville wiki, which has quickly becoming the memory alpha for the Orville fans. I had to look into Saladin. I mean, I kind of thought that was, from the context of the story, fighting the Knights Templar over Jerusalem. Okay, I thought this was, a Muslim leader back in the day. He was the founder of the Ayyubid dynasty and the first sultan of both Egypt and Syria. So kind of an Alexander the Great kind of figure from that time. His army defeated the Crusaders at the decisive Battle of Hattin in 1187, capturing Jerusalem and reestablishing Muslim military dominance in the region. And he died at the age of 55, having given away much of his personal wealth to his subjects. So, one of the most famous Kurdish people of all time. And
that's fascinating. I knew...
Fascinating tale.
Saladin is like one of those names that you know, but unless you know it or study theology or whatever, it's not a huge factor. But I bet you it's got to be like, I like that John was Saladin and not, the Christians.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I think I thought that was a nice move.
It was. It kind of reminds me of like when you get to see films produced in countries that you were so-called enemies of during a war, and you see that they're just people, man, and not to skip to the end, but they were from a different country, possibly of a different religion, probably of a different ideology, but at the end of the day, they're all just people.
Oh, and I love that. Like, we're fighting over the same God, but we just do it differently.
Just slightly differently. So different gods, right? No, same God. And even John didn't know. He's like, different prophet, maybe?
Amazing.
I don't know.
So good.
David Goodman stated that the characters, the visual look of the characters were based on actual movie stars. But I
am not shocked. I mean, I wonder how... the Stellan Skarsgård, you have it written down here. I was like, this is that dude for sure. I didn't focus on any of the other ones, so go ahead and list out.
Then the other one, Franz, was looked a lot like Patton Oswalt, who I just adore. In so many ways. Also, a huge Star Trek fan. Patton Oswalt is. And a film called Just Stand Down about an autistic woman who was trying to submit a script for Star Trek, and her trials and tribulations trying to get that done. Had a film, and that was basically a cameo in that movie that just really brought me to tears. So if you haven't, if you haven't checked that out,
he's a fascinating person who's gone through quite a lot and still does his best to be humorous and fascinating. He lost his wife very tragically. I was too busy noticing Stellan to notice anyone else. And
then, I don't know, but they could have just brought Jason Alexander back to play the Rhinocesaurian or whatever race that is.
Rhinocesaurian, I think that's
they're calling it. Sure, we'll go with that. Celeste, I really, Gina Torres from Firefly.
Gotcha.
Or,
I think that's
Serenity was right. I was also thinking maybe Gabrielle Union Wade, as she goes by now that she's married to Dwayne Wade, formerly of the Miami Heat. Also, cast member of Bring It On with our own.
Why is Bring It On significant?
Because of our own Claire Kramer from the Roddenberry Podcast Network and Fanatics.
Well, I'll say this about Celeste and of Claire Kramer, hottie patatis. They are cute. Celeste is a beautiful woman.
She is, and she was rocking those overalls with the little tank top cutoff thing. Not that I noticed. Not that I
mean, no one noticed.
Nobody noticed that.
There was dialogue on that page.
And I was so glad to see Lieutenant Dan get the thumbnail on the episode.
Yeah,
so
very
good for him. And his big giant head kind of fit the circular thumbnail of the page just wonderfully. Maybe that was that was why.
Probably right. I mean, it's just such a funny character that they just commit I don't. We need to note to self, note to show. We need to look up that actor and do a little bit of a deep dive on him to kind of see what else he does. I don't know anything about that actor.
I don't either. Now, I did have a chance to chat with Jim Mahoney that plays Ensign Brosk, the Simlish guy. Who got plenty of panel time. I was going to say screen time, but it's panel time in the comic, but no lines. And I just wanted to see one like deep dot blop blop.
But Leor Kishinar.
There you go. I know your Simlish is much better than mine, but I just wanted one line out of Brosk. We didn't get it.
I would say this: it's not a good thing that my Simlish is good, because that just is a sign that I played way too much Sims. So that's could have been better.
You got to spend your time. You could have been doing so many worse things.
This is absolutely true.
We did get an Admiral Halsey sighting though, which I was nice.
They nailed his backside.
They did. He looked.
I don't know if that's a kosher thing to say.
They nailed his posterior profile.
Yes, correct.
I don't even know if those two things go together.
Posterior profile, absolutely.
Yeah, silhouette.
That is the scientific technological term. You nailed it. Just like Uranus. Yep.
And with exactly right. The anal orifices.
Also, I thought that was a little rash of Gordon to make that assessment of those people before he had any idea what caused them to keep the engines on. Or what was like, why didn't they communicate back? He had no idea what the situation was.
I think it's that kind of, rash decision making, rushing to judgment, not considering other options or not considering other people's positions that, that comes with maturity and might be one of the things that that honestly is holding him back from moving up the chain of command.
Or wanting to, right? Because to further that point that you bring up, it's a good assessment. The second Stellan Skarsgård says, "Oh, we know about your trip to the Ancana," whatever. He goes, "That's classified." Like, "Oh, well, we know about it." Like, "Okay, let me just tell you everything then." It's not like they say the code word or whatever.
Right. They're like, "No, it's classified." No, it isn't.
No, it isn't. Oh, yeah, cool. There was a human head, and there was a knife, and they stabbed it.
And they're all like, Katniss Evergreen, and they're all like, I don't know. And they're
so funny to me. Like, but again, so on point for Gordon to some extent, who probably never thought in his lifetime he'd be in a classified situation.
Exactly right.
You know what I mean?
So, and I kind of wonder did we ever find out what Ed did before, like how he came up through the ranks? There's one scene where he's like in red, like a flashback scene. That might be one. That might come from one of the comics. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little confused on that now. But I thought there was like a flashback scene that shows him back in the day wearing a red uniform, like Gordon's.
I think you are getting it from the comics, which I think it is in the next one. That being said, though, I'm trying to think of what little information we get from Ed after his first date with Kelly.
Yeah. And he was
still working his way through, or he was working his way through,
and he was managing some like Starbase, whatever. I don't want to guess at the name because what just came to my head can't be right.
Well, go for it. What is that?
You guys think I don't have a filter, but trust me, there's you have no idea the stuff that I think that doesn't come out.
You have a filter.
But yeah, it was like the Nebula Pervosa star system or something like that. It was something like that, and he was managing a station there, and exactly. And commuting back and forth. And I remember we looked at that, but I don't know if he came up through like engineering or like and here's why I bring it up, because it seems like all of Gordon's best moves as a pilot are pretty much dictated by Ed. Like go down, skim along the atmosphere, go real fast, and then pull up real hard and watch the krill ships explode. Like in this, story, he's like, all right, get in closer to the thing. And Gordon's like, closer? Kind of like a very Tim Robbins, we're going to do what? From the original Top Gun. And then the gravity affects the missiles, more than it does the ship, because apparently they can't fight the gravity as well as the ship can, and they pull up. So it seems like Ed knows a lot about how to floss and fly that mofo all up in that.
Yeah.
Where And Gordon's just kind of like the fully automated, like doing what Ed says to do sort of thing, which makes me feel like Ed knows a lot about flying.
I think that's correct. I mean, let's not forget, you're wearing the shirt. Gordon knows how to hug the donkey.
He's been hugging the donkey since flight school.
That's what I'm saying. So he knows how to fly.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting though? It caught my attention too, for Gordon to be such an accomplished helmsman, essentially, or, pilot, for him to question Ed's judgment in that moment is also odd too.
Right.
Like, he's not only your captain, but you're also a pilot, and you should understand gravity to that extent. However, Gordon hadn't been flying a ship because the Union also kind of went, this guy's a little bit of an F up. And, it took Ed cajoling them to put him on the ship too.
Yeah, that was some world-class cajoling.
That's right. So I think your assessment's correct, because we've heard Ed before say, I can't know everything on the ship, right? He doesn't know communications or some sort of array.
The fire panel, Jess.
That's what it was.
The fire panel.
That's what it was. I knew there was something, and that's what it was.
So, and now that I'm kind of breaking it down in my mind, it's a matter of kind of like symbiosis and trust, right? I mean, Ed knows that Gordon can do whatever crazy plan he comes up with. And Gordon, after, suppressing that, shock of, we're going to do what? Is able to do it and willing to do it. So, yeah, good for them. And speaking of that, I still thought the crew coordination, the communication between the crew was very well, depicted in the comic books. That you could still see the different folks talking back and forth, one hand knowing, one figurative hand knowing what the other hand was doing as they were coming up with a plan to deal with this transport. I thought that was really well done, and something that got to be an art form of itself, is to depict that much information with a picture, a still picture, and just a few words that you could fit in a bubble.
That is your brain is in where my brain is, because when we did have David on, he was talking about how important comics were to him just growing up, and how much of an honor it felt like, hey, I got Dark Horse I got to do this thing that I wanted to do. I'm actually currently, they're listing me as an assistant writer, but mostly I'm just going over and editing their work for a comic. And it is so challenging to adhere to all that you can fit in a page, how many pages you're supposed to have, and still do it succinctly but tell a moving story. So that is exactly where my head is at. The ability, they don't waste time, they don't waste space, but they're also not cramming a bunch of things in. They're letting all of the pieces of the storytelling do the work to make it a really enjoyable, smooth, action-filled comic. And
that's amazing that you just happen to have that experience going on right now of editing a comic. I had a little bit like less relevant that I was able to kind of connect the dots on. One is like anytime anybody has ever started, if anybody still used Twitter when it was 140 character limit, right? You kind of had to go back and make every word count, every single word.
Makes you a really good writer, for sure.
And that was something when, we got the mission log, the Orville Twitter account, that I would put some things on there occasionally and have to do. The other thing was I got my first writing assignment for Sci-Fi 5 was the life and career of Adam West, who spent 8 decades in the industry. And to get that down to under 5 minutes, with an intro and an outro and, hopefully a little time for ad space in the middle, was really challenging. And it turns out it's a lot more time consuming to write less than to write more, to whittle something down to where there's nothing left that you can remove. As one of my favorite quotes is, you have achieved perfection not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to remove.
Wow. That is an amazing quote, and one I will have to use in the future. I had a really great couple of teachers in high school, actually, because I was like in honors lit and honors, writing. I don't even know. But and I don't do this as a speaker, but in writing, I'm much better. But being succinct and not like restating yourself. It was what is it called? On Writing Well was the book, and I usually have the guy's name right at the tip of my fingers, and I don't have it right now. But the book On Writing Well, the guy talks about it, and being succinct is the best way to write. And then when I've read other people's work and have been asked to give them critiques, is usually the first one is this paragraph says the exact same thing as the paragraph did before it, and it's really hard to write. It's tough. Actually, another good version of that is the like pop songs. I think it was the Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl, who said that pop song hook should be like a bumper sticker. You should know exactly what it is by hearing the first line. So it's not easy, but overcomplicating things usually makes for a more difficult storytelling situation. Yeah,
and just done really well. And you know, David did mention in our supplemental episode with him that he had never written a comic book before. But he
loved
wanted
them.
to. Yeah. It's cool. Amazing that I think it came around this nicely. When John offered to buy a drink for Celeste, it wasn't that long ago in the episode New Dimensions where he just said, like, money. I know people used it to buy sandwiches, stuff like that. Just kind of a metaphor, like dialing a phone or hanging up or that kind of thing.
It's yet again making me think of Gen Z, who says to their mom, "Why do you say hang up the phone?"
They can't help it. They weren't there.
But that's just it. So it does sound like I like that theory that it's just a remnant of times past.
Right.
But also, that's not a very smooth John Lamar thing.
I think there's probably better lines in the John Lamar Big Book of Pickup Lines.
But I think that's because his overall goal wasn't to pick her up. I think it really was like trying to suss her out. And
get her to talk.
Yeah. So he's trying to put her on the offense, buying a drink, putting the ball in her court. So I think he was being strategic.
Got it. Strategery.
But I think you're right. Strategery.
And is the Calivan tech something they could have been using this whole time? Like ever since to make their ship look like whatever they wanted to as a holographic tech.
One would insinuate, since at least
because it was on the ship for command performance,
right?
Still on the ship now. I mean, I want to go back and rewatch season 1 and think of all the times they could have used it for something.
Granted, yeah. So between the time that it failed them on the krill ship and Calivan, then they could have used it in between that time. Then they might have questioned it moving forward. But it's interesting that you point that out too, because they're really skeptical about the crew of the xenoanthropologists, and yet they're not skeptical of Talea in season 2. Like, there's certain things where, like, guys, just ask a couple more questions.
Yeah, and Claire even asked the question. She was like, it's possible that they have a way to disguise themselves?
Which is like it's so smart and deductive on her part, and like, yet when Gordon's friend comes on and they're like, oh look, that's just his daughter that doesn't speak, that's not weird, you know, like we can't check her out medically, that's fine, you know, there's certain things that are you have to tell the story, but Claire is on top of it.
She is, and she did. She thought of that, and I don't think there was, there was, I think, no reason to believe otherwise. So they had nothing. It was possible they had a way to disguise themselves, but they checked out medically, and their mission to Mizar 2 checked out, and they were up until that point, members of Union academia in good standing. So, just keep an eye on them and that they did. What do you think? You want to move on to the second part?
Yes, because I think I definitely
this episode
do.
I think has a lot of things to talk about.
Great. I knowing us, we have a lot to talk about. I'll see you on the other side.
Alrighty, I'll be there. So we've come to the part of the show where we explore the big ideas in the comic book The World of Avis and discover the meanings, morals, and messages to see if they align with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. Jess, what do you think?
Well, I think this definitely aligns with the Orville philosophy, which loves to talk about religion and its place in society and a advanced society. So, I think Roddenberry challenges religion a little bit less. I think they leave space for belief and also, if you remember, we've talked about this before. There was a whole episode where Jim Kirk said that everyone was going to be fine because they saw the Son of God or whatever.
Well, that was in Bread and Circuses. It was Uhura's line, I think, at the end, where they thought it was the Rome planet, for those of you that may or may not remember. And they were kind of under the belief that these folks were sun worshippers.
Correct.
And then at the very end, Uhura said, not the son of in the sky, the son of man. And then Uhura Kirk said something, to see it unfold all over again.
Which is insane.
Would be glorious.
It's insane. Like, I remember even watching that as a kid and going, wait, so Jesus lived and died there too? It just didn't add up to me, like how they got all this same mythology.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the most part, Roddenberry believes in the freedom of belief as long as it doesn't harm other people.
And that's, I think, exactly where I was going with this one. There was another tale, and I think part of the Star Trek original series and also Next Gen, which had the script proposal where anybody could, that's how Ronald E. Moore got started, and I want to talk about a little bit about him later too. Got his start was submitting a script and having it be accepted. Star Trek the original series had scripts written by Gene. It had scripts written by the other Gene. It had scripts written by Harlan Ellison, and other folks, across the sci-fi world. So maybe they didn't all agree. Maybe they did. Who Mourns for Adonai? There was a line where Kirk says, "In our time, we have no need for your gods." Pause. Insert the line required by the censors. We find the one quite sufficient. Ooh, yeah. So that sort of, maybe kind of undid what they were trying to accomplish in that episode, some think. So it's had kind of a complicated relationship with religion, but I think you nailed it on the head. It's kind of like freedom of religion, as long as it doesn't, take away or impinge on the freedoms of other people, as well.
Feel free to not answer this as your comfort permits, but are you a religious person?
Man, I tell you what, I was raised religious, K through 12, Catholic. That's not true. First grade through 12th grade, Catholic school. Made great bonds with people that I'm still friends with. Really have found that on a instinctual level, I kind of keep coming back to that faith when I need it to carry me through times. On an intellectual level, man, I really wish I could get rid of that. Mm-hmm. So I don't. It's sort of a constant battle, with me. I mean, there's times where I'm just like, I couldn't agree more than when I saw Ed Mercer said, I think of religion as nothing more than superstition. But then there's times where there's things that are going on with me, my wife, my kid, other people. I see an ambulance drive by, and I just can't help myself from blessing myself and saying a quick prayer. Sure. I'm probably the most,
agnostic,
semi-practicing person, which I think has deep roots in Catholicism.
I was just going to say, it is so Catholic to be religiously not religious.
Yeah.
Because that's very similar to my upbringing too. And then I had a couple of aha moments at Catholic school going, what's happening here?
Right.
And actually have friends that are from different Christian denominations and speak of their religious trauma, and it really is these thought processes and who's going to hell and why, and what the woman's role is, what sex means, and that programming is so hard for them to undo. And it makes sense that that programming is something you return to in a time of need for comfort. So of course I say the Hail Mary when I can't go to sleep,
right? Because
my dad typed it out for me on his business card when I was having a hard time going to sleep. It's a mantra more than it is I was actually just last night trying to use it because the upstairs neighbors are so loud, and I was trying my hardest not to be distracted and trying to like be zen about it. And I said, okay, I'm just going to say the Hail Mary over and over again. And I got so introspective about it because I was so annoyed.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, I just started unlocking a bunch of different weird beliefs I needed to give myself in order to feel safe and comforted. And I think that that's what it normally boils down to. I would love to have spent a little bit more time with the xenoanthropologists, although we did get a taste of this from Celeste. What was really missing in their life that necessitated them needing Avis? Was Stellan Skarsgård a like rampant misogynist that was just that needed to have that outlet somehow,
right?
Or supremacist in some way that his society otherwise didn't allow for him to be? Because Celeste was lost, and what's scary about that is so many people are preyed upon, and PREYED, when they're lost and they're in need of comfort and didn't have that and don't have like a strong coping mechanism, and then find their way into a church for good or for worse. I have friends that are still very religious, and I'm very good friends with them, and we don't see eye to eye on that, but it doesn't define our relationship, and they're not trying to evangelize me all the time. What's sad is I've lost friends and lost family members who start alienating others and themselves, really, because they were lost and now they've seen the light, and all these people welcomed them in, and now they're gone in a sense. And that's where it becomes really dangerous.
It does, and it's funny because for that very reason, and so many things are pinging around in my head right now. One of which is, I kind of feel like I don't need to consult a religious text to make a decision, an ethical decision based on reason, rationale, what's right versus what's wrong. And one of my friends was like, well, where did you get your sense of what's right and wrong is? And I was like, shut up. Because I think he's right. I mean, things like don't lie, don't steal, don't kill. Like, what are all those, what are all those mores from? Well, I mean, they happen to be encapsulated in the Ten Commandments. Is that where I got that sense of right and wrong or not? I'd like to think not. That I'd like to think that those things are just wrong because they're not things that honest, ethical people do. I don't know.
It is one of the first arguments people have against people who are trying to leave or question their faith, because that was one of the first arguments I had. It's like it really is like it quakes you from inside. Like, well, how would I have learned this otherwise? First of all, we have it in our heart that tells us when it feels good and when it doesn't. People that don't have that are sociopathic and tend to rule society, which is problematic and a different conversation for another type. But if you are on the playground, you've learned right and wrong by putting it into practice. You're on the playground, you push a kid down, they start to cry, your stomach starts to hurt because your body just told you that's wrong.
Right.
You've made this person feel bad, and now what it takes is the adult who learned from that to go, that was wrong, right?
So the question I have is for the kid that it doesn't turn their stomach to knots, to the kid that makes them, to the kid that makes them feel powerful, the sociopathic kid, as you put it, is the religious rules enough to dissuade that?
I would say if someone that's the exception to the rule, not the rule. And I don't know how many people it's a lot of work to get someone that doesn't feel empathy to learn that is a danger to society and to care. That's not to say that you can't have a high functioning sociopath. Another thing that's really kind of hard to wrap your brain around in general, or my brain around at least, is all of these different types of personalities and ways that humans are. At one point in our evolution, that was a dominant gene, the sociopathy gene or psychopathy, because it helped them survive. Otherwise, that gene wouldn't have survived to today. So
Right.
there's qualities in that make for a viable human in society. There's other things that make it dangerous. So I just would have to hope that, I think that's just going to be the conundrum at the end of the day. You're going to have more people that feel empathetically but don't know what to do with that. And hopefully they can override the people that want to take advantage of that situation.
Right. Now getting back to your other point that you made so well about people being preyed upon at their weakest time by religious cults or con men or snake oil salesmen or people that promise to have all their answers.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I insisted my kids do go to Catholic school, and they did attend a Catholic school from pre-K actually all the way through 12th grade.
Wow.
And my daughter continues. She wanted to, one of her check boxes on her college wish list was a Catholic university, which he does attend. And that was so that they would have a firm, education in the actual history and origins of religion, of the realities of it, as well as the belief system, so that when somebody does come along and promise them all the answers for the low cost of 10% of their earnings, they would be able to have, an educated response, a known base upon which to make their decisions.
So wait, you're suggesting that by being embroiled in a religious institution, that their agenda is that religion, that she would be able to make an informed decision about all the other parts that came along with that religion?
You lost me at embroiled, but I'm going to say that knowledge is power.
No, hold on. I loved the education I got as a Catholic school attendee, but I'm questioning if does she get the full. Did you want her to know what it was like to be a Catholic and then be able to make the choice of that? Or, your children? Or, because Catholics leave out the part that they burned books because they didn't want people to know about other religions and their atrocities.
Well, they just get to see that now on TV, so they're learning all about that.
That's fair. But then you got someone like my father who believes that we've just made up all this history to serve the agenda also, which is complicated and way off topic.
Right.
But I guess it's hard when you're been given one perspective. But when you're a smart person and you can sort through the details, you can find what works for you and choose not to harm others. Ultimately,
right.
Especially Catholicism and Christianity is the only religion I purport to know at all. But from what I understand of other people who have other faiths, the entirety of it is to be good to others. You're going to have extremists on either side of it. I think we're best when we're going, oh, you believe that? Cool. I'm happy over here. And I would think that that's what most religions would want for people. But then you have people that take advantage.
I would think so too, until people get into power in those religions, and then their power is increased by eliminating the other religions or getting more people into theirs. And once you achieve a position of power, your only agenda then is to stay in power.
Keep the power.
Yeah. And that's something we've talked about times before. And I think that's really a big part of this one. I wanted to jump back to Ronald D. Moore just because I'll forget if I don't.
Yes, please.
But he's very much credited with in Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, in that Berman era of Star Trek, really filling in and building upon the Klingon mythology, religion, culture, those kind of things. And I think that's David Goodman with the Krill in the Orville. I think he has taken that ball and really, really run with it. And I think the premise was, as societies get more and more advanced scientifically, they tend to be less overtly religious. And they thought it would be curious to see what a technologically advanced civilization that was still religious would be like. Would they use that technology and that might that comes with it to push their agenda?
It is a fascinating thing to see and watch, because I mean, we also see it in Roddenberry too. There's a rich culture that dictates, like, say, the Klingons, right? That's their history, or even anything can turn into a religion. It's how you use it.
And I think it's funny how Ronald D. Moore turned Kahless into such a religion, because if you remember the original series episode where Kahless first appeared, he was Kahless the Unforgettable. He was a warrior from a long time ago. From what I could tell, his only superpowers were the ability to throw his voice a little bit and imitate Kirk, Spock, and Abraham Lincoln being wounded.
Those are important skills.
They are. And then that turned into a whole religion being sprung up around him. So go Ronald D. Moore for taking that little nugget out of the original series and building on it.
Gosh, I didn't even realize that. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's...
But again, you could choose, I could choose to worship this book and get all of my information out of it and interpret it to serve my needs. And that's the danger, right? And that's a good thing, though, too. If it gives you comfort, if it gives me comfort every night to read the Orville comic books, wonderful. But it starts becoming a problem when you can't accept outside information and you can't and you lose critical thinking.
Yes,
I think that's where
that critical thinking thing just becomes so evident when how many times in this, if it was text, I might do a search, but being that it's pictures, I can't. That there was sort of hands thrown in the air. Not my fault. It is the Word of Avis.
Yes.
And that's the dangerous part, because that really kind of washes your hands of things. It's not my fault. It's Avis. Can't do anything about it. My actions have no consequences.
But I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because you're the one who's very diligent about writing down your thoughts, and I'm just like, let's see what happens. We see it serve the Krill. It's just a tickle from the Avis god, and he was right on both counts.
Yeah.
And again, your religion is really just your gut and experience, or can be, but he's a better leader because he was able, the Krill captain, because he was able to trust his gut based off of that religion. So it's a chicken and the egg situation, I guess.
Yeah. And it was a good thing that he had the Sazaron there to remind him that don't ignore the whisper. It is the voice of Avis.
Well, they all do have one, don't they, on the ship with them?
I think they do. So there's a little bit of debate whether or not Sazaron was the name of the religious counselor on the Krill ship that was, that Ed and Gordon turn the lights up real bright on,
or if that's
like the title. Now, at some point in this episode, they referred to him as the Sazaron. So I will...
Because otherwise that Sazaron from the episode would be no longer with us.
Oh, yeah.
He's with Avis now.
Yeah, he got space vampired real good by the bright lights.
Exactly. So... My question to you, my only question, the last question I have for you, do you feel like it was rude of Ed to point blank say that religion was superstition?
Well, I mean, I think he was asked what he thinks. And I think if you're asked what somebody thinks, you have to be willing to take the answer. And I think the question was something like, you look down on us because we believe in something bigger than ourselves. And his answer was like, no, I just think religion is superstitious. So again, it's if you're going to ask somebody what they think, you got to be okay with the answer as being their opinion. And I think the real crux, the real decision that, the crew of the Orville had to make, and that buck stopping with the captain is, do we let these people go or not? Like, do we see the ship flying into krill space? Okay, they're not answering us. Have their navigations and comms and sensors like all malfunctioned, and are they flying into there by accident, at which point they're probably going to get killed and we need to save them? If they do penetrate the border, is that going to start an interstellar conflict, possibly a war? And that, I think the answers to both of those questions are an obvious no. We got to stop this ship from doing that. And then when you find out, hey, we're, religious people trying to defect, basically trying to join the krill and join their religion and join those people, and we think they'll accept us, do you let them go and just let them go do that at that point anyway and take their own chances?
It's a very good question, and I for a second thought this episode or this comic was going to go in that direction. Are they going to be granted religious freedom? Is that still a tenet of the Union society at this point? They allow the Mocklins to be the way the Mocklins are up to a point.
Yeah.
I think the issue is if they really wanted to practice religious freedom or become a refugee, there are ways to do that. I think they become a security liability if they leave.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I don't think it's right to keep them if they don't want to be there and they truly believe in that religion. I think that's wrong, because I would say the same thing if you told me I couldn't practice. I had to be religious. You know what I mean?
I do.
Would want the freedom to not be religious.
I do. And I think the right way, the best way to handle it, honestly, would be to say, we've been studying this book. We believe in it. We would like to go live with the krill and explore it. And then that could open up a dialogue between the krill and the Union to where they could, for lack of a better term, have like an exchange program. But to, cross a border in a very tense, relationship between two people that have a very tense relationship, I think is really, really kind of what had to be stopped.
That was the bad version. They were doing it in the absolutely wrong way. And so that, I think you're right. That is why they couldn't let them go. But I do think now it's less Ed's decision and more like the Supreme Court's decision.
Yeah, exactly right. So, really, like other times you talked about, it's, it could have gone down the direction of Ed saying, all right, let me get Admiral Halsey on the phone, tell him we got these folks that want to go there. Can we work this out? Do we want to work it out? Because these people are Union academics, and maybe they know some academic stuff that we don't want the krill to find out about. But that's a conversation for other folks. And Ed is usually pretty good about calling the boss to get direction. Just never did in this comic.
Well, they might have if they weren't 350,000 light years off course.
Or if they weren't restricted to just a few words inside every thought bubble.
Gosh darn it, David Goodman. No, that's the challenge. Just like we are restricted to a certain amount of time to do this podcast as well. What I think ultimately, and I've said this before, I'll say it 500 times again, the conversation that the Orville literally inspires us to have and other people to have, just to ask the questions and watch Ed ask the questions and give us the opportunity to answer them for ourselves. That's what really makes this a special series, a special show. Its own separate thing from Star Trek, not better or worse, not what Star Trek should be now. That's my own personal, soapbox.
That's true.
But what a nice opportunity to have reflection of us in the future, so that it doesn't feel so personal.
Exactly. And I found that, as far as meanings, morals, and messages go, religious freedom, also freedom from religion if you don't want to be, involved at all. If it breaks other laws, right? We have civil laws that, just because you're of a certain religious belief, that maybe it's okay to do something that happens to be illegal within society at large. And then, the last thing I thought of, and this has been a thought that's been coalescing over the last few days that actually started on a conversation we had on the Mission Log Discord the other day, which if you're not a Mission Log patron, go to patreon.com/missionlog, join up, and then you can join the conversation on our Discord channel, which is kind of, what do you identify as? So if I gave you a blank piece of paper, Jessica, and said, write down what you are. Just what would you write?
I'm really upset that you asked this because I literally don't know that I could answer it, and I've just recently been thinking about this.
Okay.
And it's complicated.
I would think most people of my demographic would probably write, man, ostensibly straight man,
Sure.
Christian, kinda, American,
Right.
things like that. Anything similar thoughts for you, or do you want to abstain?
The reason why it's complicated is I'm beginning to understand that I'm more than one thing, and that a lot of the reason we have identity is because we were just born in a time and place, and it is how arbitrary it is to have to be an American and a patriot just because I was fortunate enough to be born here is an awkward thing. I'm not just an actor, but I label myself as an actor. I'm an artist, but I'm afraid to say I'm an artist. So I like being a woman, but I didn't understand why I couldn't have been a boy at one point. It took a long time for me to come to terms with actually being a woman.
Right.
But not necessarily the most flowery of them all. And what does that mean? Especially when I was being raised in a household where that kind of woman was appreciated rather than the tomboyish woman. So it's just interesting that's in the air right now.
So I love everything you're saying, and I'm going to kind of pull the rug out from under you maybe a little bit, because what I question is, why don't we start off with person? Why don't we start off with, human being, or I'm a person? And I think since we've all got so deeply ingrained sort of more granular things that we identify as, it's so easy to otherize other people, right? And make them part of a different group, part of an adversarial group, part of a group that believes different things, that has different agenda, that you need to be somewhat combative with. That I think until we all, or a critical mass of us, identify as human beings, as putting humanity first, that all of these little, religious wars, holy wars, cultural wars, ideology wars, political wars are going to continue. And I think that's what we have to get past. And that's what this comic book really kind of made me noodle on as I was reading through it and putting my notes together.
What I'm impressed with is that you solved the problem thanks to David Goodman and the Orville.
Oh, David Goodman solved the problem. He just
Yeah. You extrapolated some serious thoughts there, Mike, and I appreciate that. And I've got a lot to noodle on now too. Mission Log the Orville is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Technical production by the indelible, incredible Earl Green. What does indelible mean? I added that one. You didn't write that.
I think indelible means incredibly hardworking.
Yeah, indelible.
Yeah.
I think you've used indelible before. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is podcast.roddenberry.com. If you're watching the live premiere on YouTube, join us right now on the Mission Log Discord to continue the conversation. Don't have access? Well, you just go to patreon.com/Mission Log. For as little as $1 a month, you can at myself or Mike on the Discord.
Join us next time on Mission Log the Orville as we discuss Launch Day, Parts 1 and 2.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.